Soviet Union, Thursday, November 24th, 1938. A few kilometers south of Moscow, the courier from the Kremlin has just delivered the dispatches to Stalin's dacha. Insanely paranoid, Stalin lives hidden away in the middle of the forest. His residence is protected by anti-aircraft batteries and a security force of 300 soldiers. No one is permitted to enter the dacha without the dictator's specific permission. Only Valentina, his governess, has the right of access throughout. Every morning, as usual, she brings him his dispatches. At 7 a.m., the dictator is still up. He has spent all night verifying a list that sentences 3,178 people to death or deportation. A long and painstaking task, which is far from over, but Stalin is a meticulous man. He takes his time, ticking off the names of the condemned one by one.
Чудовище. Компьютер, который, когда-то приняв решение, что он эту власть получит в руки, он ее уже никому упускать не хотел.
At 60, and at the peak of his power, he controls everything. He leads an austere life. Nothing interests him beyond exercising his own power.
Но 5 или 6, там сколько там дач было, много всего. Дело все в том, что Сталин любил власть. И больше ему не нужно было ничего. Власть. Полная, абсолютная власть.
Stalin has reigned over the USSR for 10 years. Comprised of 15 republics, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics occupies 1/6 of the world's landmass and extends over 11 time zones. It is the biggest empire of all time. At this stage of his life, he is a cold, insensitive man. Stalin, the name that he chose during the Russian Revolution, means the man of steel. Stalin is the ultimate totalitarian dictator. He is convinced he has been chosen by Providence to transform society and build an ideal world, communism. He wants to create the new man, disciplined, obedient, hardworking, and blindly obedient to the party, meaning to Stalin. To accomplish this colossal project, Stalin must destroy everything before he can rebuild it, eradicate all privileges, eliminate all traitors, and if necessary, he is prepared to exterminate half of the population. For a year and a half, he has put into place a scientific system of massive elimination that is called the Great Purge. Between July 1937 and November of 1938, he has had 800,000 Russians executed, 1,500 victims per day, one every 57 seconds. At the end of November 1938, Stalin has attained absolute power. He has exterminated all his enemies, whether real or imagined. It is time to stop the bloodbath before his people realize that he is nothing but a murderous madman. To absolve himself of any guilt, Stalin will accuse the chief of the secret police, Nikolai Yezhov, the man known as the bloodthirsty midget, of having committed these crimes behind his back. Yezhov obeys him like a dog and has tortured and assassinated thousands of innocent people with his own hands. Soon it will be his turn to face torture and death. Stalin has summoned Yezhov to his office at 6 p.m. It is 7:30 a.m. Stalin has finally finished his daily 16-hour workload. He lies down on the sofa in his office and sleeps peacefully for a few hours before putting his plan into action. As he says himself, the greatest of pleasures is to choose one's victim, prepare one's blow, wreak one's vengeance, then go to bed. It is 10 a.m. Stalin has slept barely 3 hours. Despite his immense popularity, the little father of the peoples, worshipped by the entire world, lives like a lone wolf in his huge dacha. The villa has several living rooms and a dozen or so bedrooms which remain empty and where he never sets foot. Since his wife died 6 years ago, Stalin has totally isolated himself. Although once surrounded by friends and stepfamily, today there is only one person he trusts, his housekeeper, Valentina. She is the one who looks after him daily. Utterly faithful, illiterate, naive, always in good spirits, she has no interest whatsoever in politics. She also secretly shares the dictator's bed. This relationship would last until his death.
Ее функции, она делала все. То есть она не готовила, нет, но она подавала, принимала, меняла постель, укладывала его. Она делала для него все. Она у него была правая рука.
Valentina is the only person who knows all the dictator's weaknesses. Behind his image as the invulnerable leader, Stalin has fragile health and suffers from chronic throat infections, psoriasis, and arteriosclerosis, which need daily treatments.
Сталин был маленького роста. Во-вторых, у него была одна сухая рука. В детстве он попал под трамвай, в аварию, в общем. Рука была сухая, и он ее так как-то держал. В-третьих, он был рябой. Он переболел оспой, и эти рябинки остались. Любила она его страшно, она любила его безумно. И, видимо, это был его тип женщины. Она такая была русская красавица. С толстой попой, с русой косой. И такая хохотушка. Иногда она от него делала аборты. Все об этом знали. Все об этом знали, потому что она куда-то уезжала, там на 3 дня, через 3 дня она приезжала.
Now Stalin lives alone with Valentina, but previously he had been married twice. His first wife died of an illness when she was very young. His second wife, Nadia, had 2 children with Stalin. When she was alive, the 2 step-families would often come to the dacha for picnics. Those were happy times. But in 1932, Nadia committed suicide by shooting herself in the heart. During 13 years of marriage, she had progressively discovered who the man she married really was.
Наверное, что-то она стала понимать, потому что стали пропадать люди, которые были в их окружении. Стали пропадать люди. Наверное, она же была не идиотка, она соображала, в чем тут дело. И она поняла, что, в общем, он не так прост, как кажется.
Right up to the end, out of loyalty to her husband, Nadia kept her suffering to herself. But before committing suicide, she confided to her brother and sister-in-law, Alexander's parents.
Обращенное к отцу и маме. Письмо о том, что она вынуждена была осуществить этот поступок, потому что с Иосифом она жить больше не может, а спрятаться от него она тоже не может, потому что он ее найдет везде.
When talking of his wife, Stalin used to say, "She left me like an enemy. She left me crippled for the rest of my life."
Она его бросила. Она его бросила, он ее любил. Предательство по отношению к себе. Она его предала. Сталин, наверное, закрылся. Сталин, наверное, закрылся. И дальше уже он пережил это.
It was this event that caused Stalin to lose all human feeling. He began to develop a hatred for her entire family, which he systematically eliminated.
Что же касается характера Иосифа Виссарионовича, то это двуликий Янус, который переступит через все на свете, в том числе через вас, было написано, черным по белому.
And it is precisely on this day in November 1938 that Evgenia, Alexander's mother, is about to make a mistake that will prove fatal. It is 1 p.m. In his office, Stalin receives Evgenia, his sister-in-law, who has come to pay him an unexpected visit. Evgenia is the sister of his second wife, Nadia, the one who committed. Since this tragic event, Stalin detests all of his in-laws. He receives Evgenia coldly. Evgenia is frightened. Part of her family has already been executed or sent to the gulag by Stalin. She even suspects he is responsible for poisoning her husband a few days earlier. Yet, in spite of the danger, Evgenia has come to give him a letter from Maria, another of Stalin's sister-in-laws, who he has sent to the gulag for no apparent reason. Living conditions in Stalin's gulags in Siberia are terrible. Up to 50 degrees below zero in the winter, a 12-hour workday, not enough food. Prisoners die of cold, hunger, disease, exhaustion, and despair. From her gulag, Maria has managed to get a letter to her sister-in-law begging Stalin to set her free. She writes, "If I don't get out of this camp, I will die here." Many years later, Evgenia described the scene to her son, Alexander.
Сталин прочитал это письмо и попросил маму больше никогда такие поручительства на себя не брать. Мама говорила, он не стучал ногами, но он мне сказал это таким голосом. Вот достаточно было ему вот какой-то придать своему голосу.
In fact, Stalin hated any pleading for those he had classified once and for all as his enemies. Not only would Maria not be freed, she would be transferred to a camp that was even worse and be executed several months later. And since Stalin never forgot an insult, he would retaliate against Evgenia by sending her to the gulag a few years later. Almost all of Stalin's family were victims of his murderous insanity. Pavel, brother of his second wife Nadia, poisoned on the 2nd of November 1938. Evgenia, his wife, and Kira, their daughter, sent to the gulag in 1947. Anna, the elder sister of Stalin's first wife, 6 years in the gulag. Her husband, Stanislav, shot the 12th of February, 1940. Alexander, his first wife's brother, shot the 20th of August, 1941. His wife, Maria, and her sister, Mariko, shot together in March 1942. not counting all his close friends who disappeared one after the other.
Тирания или это не тирания? Как вы считаете? Ну, посадить всю свою семью, я считаю, что это...
Stalin himself grew up in a family atmosphere of insecurity and violence. He was the only survivor of 3 children. His father, a shoemaker, was an alcoholic and regularly beat his son. He died when Stalin was 10. His mother, a housekeeper, noticed his intelligence early on and managed to enroll him in a seminary so he could become a priest. A brilliant student, he would complete 8 years of studies before being expelled because of his subversive ideas. He had just discovered Marxism. Then he became passionately committed to the revolutionary struggle against the Tsar. Stalin killed people with his own hands and became the head of a Bolshevik gang that robbed banks, plundered villages, and planned assassinations to finance Lenin's party. When the Bolsheviks came to power, Lenin made him one of the top party officials. Nevertheless, before his death, Lenin wanted to prevent him from becoming his successor. In his will, he would write, "Stalin is much too brutal. He must be stopped from taking power." As every day, in the early afternoon, Stalin is at work in his office at the Kremlin. This little room is the center of the empire. From all 4 corners of the country, millions of civil servants supply the dictator with every scrap of information they can collect. Alone at the top of an immense administrative pyramid, Stalin knows everything. He is omnipotent. To assist him in this colossal job, he has 4 secretaries who are on call 24 hours a day. Distant and methodical, Stalin always proceeds in the same manner.
Ну, чье сегодня дежурство? Идешь, приходишь, стучишься, встречает Сталин. Он говорил: товарищ, будем работать. Приходила, стучала в дверь, он встречал, отодвигал стул и говорил: садитесь, я диктую. И диктовал. Потом спрашивал: товарищ, через сколько времени принесете стенограмму? Минут через 40, хорошо. Чтобы запятых нельзя было и точек сделать неправильно. Если писала неграмотно или говорила неграмотно, как вот теперь говорят, увольняли.
Stalin examines the list of the condemned alone, in secret. The personnel of the Politburo must not know that he is the one who condemns those thousands of innocent people. He crosses out a name from time to time, an old comrade exiled with him in Siberia when he was a young revolutionary, or an old Georgian Bolshevik like himself. As for the others, a simple cross in the margin suffices to send them to their deaths. On this same list, Stalin also adds the names of people who are currently at work right across the hall.
Каждый день, где я работал в аппарате ЦК партии, были на кабинетах дощечки. Начальник такого-то отдела, фамилия его, имя, отчество. Начальник такого. Приходили, его нет. Спрашивали: арестован, враг народа. И мы верили. Пришли к нам арестовывать Алексея Захаровича Лебедева. Вот. Сказали: будете здесь жить. Я побежала за Алексеем Захаровичем и говорю: Леня, Леня, неужели ты враг? Он мне ответил: я чист, как слеза младенца. Тебя я обязательно найду. Но больше этот человек в моей жизни не появился. Никогда я его больше не встретил. Оказывается, он был расстрелян через полгода. Через 2 месяца после ареста Катукова была арестована я. Следователь у меня был по фамилии Эпштейн. Бил меня, насиловал, и вот до сих пор я ношу следы битвы, его пряжки. У него был ремень с большой железной пряжкой. Он меня бил. Вы можете потрогать эту шишку, она видна. Даже до сих пор, столько лет прошло, она при мне.
All of Stalin's collaborators were sent throughout the country to verify that the death sentences were carried out, a way for Stalin to make them his accomplices. They could not later accuse him of crimes that they themselves had also been involved in. Anastas Mikoyan, one of Stalin's principal ministers, was one of them. His son remembers.
Обычно фигурируют этими списками на расстрел. Причем, вы знаете, это сейчас вот нормальному человеку подумать, это вообще страшно. Вы представляете, список. Никаких там ни свидетельских показаний, ничего, список. Вот список подписывают, расстрелять.
The families of the condemned were also to be eliminated.
Хотя бы такую деталь. Когда высшее постановление он выпустил, что с 14 лет уже можно расстреливать. По 15-16 лет расстреливали. Это я знаю. Были. Что это за человек? Это зверь? Он был абсолютно безжалостный человек.
Today is Thursday, the 24th of November, 1938. Stalin has just signed the last list of people sentenced to death during the Great Purge. One last thing remains for him to do: designate someone to take the blame for all of these crimes. This afternoon, Stalin has summoned Nikolai Yezhov, the chief of secret police. A brilliant strategist, Stalin has already foreseen needing to sacrifice him when the Great Terror began a year and a half ago. He had immediately seen how to use this cruel man, nicknamed the Bloody Dwarf. A little apparatchik willing to do anything to win his master's trust. Yezhov had overseen executions throughout the empire and did not hesitate to torture and kill with his own hands at the terrible prison of Lubyanka. From July 1937 until this day in November of 1938, Yezhov, leader of the Great Purge, under Stalin's orders, had had 770,000 people executed with a bullet to the temple. To encourage him, Stalin made him one of the great heroes of the regime. His portraits were carried triumphantly by the crowd. He was applauded by the Politburo, and he went on vacation with the highest dignitaries of the regime. But today, Yezhov is frightened. For some time now, he has sensed his disgrace drawing nearer. The only thing he hopes to save is his own head. But Stalin has signed his last list of death sentences. Now he needs a scapegoat. Cynically, he accuses Yezhov of the worst crimes. He calls him a rat, a bloodthirsty renegade. He accuses him of having massacred hundreds of innocent people behind his back, and of being a spy on payroll for the British, the Germans, and the Japanese. He even charges him with being an alcoholic, a degenerate, and a sodomite, all chief accusations that will serve to condemn him. Yezhov doesn't even try to defend himself. He knows that once Stalin has decided to condemn someone, nothing can stop him. His fate is sealed. But Yezhov isn't only afraid for his own life, he is also afraid for his daughter, Natalia, who was only 10 years old when he was arrested and knew nothing about what her father did.
Меня очень любил, он очень меня любил, я это чувствовала, потому что я его так встречала всегда, и он такой радостный всегда был. Я вот сейчас все время думаю иногда так, ну не иногда, уже давно думаю, что в одном человеке вот как могло уживаться два человека? Такой вроде как кровожадный, да, и такой добрый.
Only once, when she was 6 years old, did she suspect what her father's work entailed.
Мы с ним играли в прятки. Нас только вдвое и было там, детей вообще не было. И вот я спряталась в отцовском кабинете. Он был открыт нечаянно как-то, не закрытый. И я и там сижу, и альбом лежит рядом. Ну, я что делать? Он там по мне пускай ищет. Я начала листать, а там мертвые дети. Прямо вот детишки лежат, кто без ножки, кто без ручки. Все убитые. Я как заорала, вылетела оттуда. У него вообще было 3 класса образования. И он какой-то был рабочий питерский просто. А потом его начали так вот двигать, и выскочил он куда. Сталину это было на руку, потому что он исполнял все абсолютно. Все. Он его использовал капитально. Его расстреляли 4 февраля. Он его пытал. Его когда повели на допрос, ему сразу сломали руку. А он же худенький, этот маленький, просил не трогать родню, что они ни в чем не виноваты. И очень прошу воспитать мою дочь. Это под дулом пистолета он про меня вспомнил. Мне было так немножко и жутко, и как-то, приятно, что ли. Как-то волнительно.
From that day on, Natalia was confined to an orphanage in the north of Russia until she reached adulthood. She didn't find out what had happened to her father until years later. She was never allowed to use the name Yezhov again. Today she lives alone in the same area where she had once been deported. Once the Yezhov matter is wrapped up, Stalin pays a visit to his children, just as he does each day. They have been looked after by a nanny since their mother, Nadia, committed. Stalin reviews their homework and signs the school notebooks of Svetlana, 12 years old, and Vasily, 18. He especially adores his daughter and is very affectionate towards her. He takes time to play with her and invents a game in which she's the boss who gives him orders, which he obeys with pleasure.
Дело все в том, что Света была девочкой послушная. Сталин Светлану любил. Она была его надежда. Она хорошо училась. Они переписывались все время. Она ему писала какие-то письма-записочки. Он ей присылал какие-то письма-записочки. Он ее иногда брал с собой, Сталин ее брал с собой отдыхать на юг.
But Svetlana, who lives in a cocoon, notices that many members of her family and friends have disappeared. She would write, "But where did they all go? Why is our house so empty?" More and more, I felt the loneliness and the emptiness around me, a desert world where my school and my nanny were all that was left. After a long day well spent, Stalin reclines on his old sofa, listening to his favorite piece, Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 23. Alone in the early morning, in his immense dacha, the dictator has every reason to be satisfied. On this 24th of November, 1938, he has eliminated all his enemies, and he is now the absolute ruler of the Soviet Union. On March 1st, 1953, Stalin, shut away in his office, did not appear for the entire day. His entourage didn't dare disturb him. When at last the Kremlin courier entered the office, he found Stalin unconscious, lying on the floor, the victim of a major stroke. His agony lasted 5 days. He was 75 years old. Stalin died the same way that he governed, alone in his office. The man who was responsible for the death of over 20 million people died at the summit of his power, mourned by millions of Soviets and even by some of his victims. He had created a system that would outlast him for over 35 years.